Alex Young, how you doing?
Good, Becko.
The Offspring.
How's it going, Becko?
Dave Grohl, how you going, mate?
Good, man.
Pete, it's been a long time coming.
Oh, Becko, hasn't it indeed?
We go inside the dressing room, speak to the biggest names in music,
Keith Richards, the Rolling Stones.
and crack open their Eskis.
That's exactly how I imagined you, by the way, sitting opposite me with a vodka and orange.
You're a discerning chap. This is The Rider.
Hey, it's Becko. Welcome back to The Rider. And last week was Chuck from Simple Plan. They're back with a new album, their 6th album, but also it's a big deal for them. They're in their 40s now. They're still writing very similar songs, and he really tackled the image that Simple Plan has had over the years of being, quite an emo band, but now in their 40s to make it different. You can go back and listen to it right now and catch up on that one. And also rock photographer Tony Mott, which got a massive response as well. That is on all platforms now this week. A big announcement, Good Things Festival. It went on sale with the return of Tism. Can you believe it? Tism back after 19 years. They're working on a brand new album as well from what I'm hearing. But what a lineup. You got Bring Me the Horizon, you got Deftones, No FX, Amity Affliction, 303 as well, Cosmic Psychos, and of course Tism as well. Those dates on their Facebook page, and of course it's all happening in December. Also, a big announcement this week, Billy Joel coming to Melbourne, the MCG, for one show only. And we've all heard the whole one show only thing over the years so many times, but it literally is one show. December 10 at the MCG. Those tickets go on sale July 4. No word yet whether this is going to be an announcement for a promo tour or whether it's literally just one show because Billy Joel's going up to the Whitsundays for a holiday and just doing one show. But those tickets are on sale through Frontier Touring, and we just can't wait to see Billy Joel, an open-air concert at the MCG. Now, this week on The Rider, Kav from Eskimo Joe.
I feel like that there's a direct relationship in writing a good song, getting out there and playing it in front of people, and then getting that reaction back, from the people, as you play it. Like there's certain songs we play in Eskimo Joe that, I'm still not sick of playing From the Sea and, everybody singing along. It's just one of those things.
He's got that brand new song, Machines of Love and Grace. That is the first taste of his brand new album, which will be called the same thing, Machines of Love and Grace. In fact, it's a brilliant song. We're going to find out from Kav whether this was meant to be an Eskimo Joe song, because my God, it sounds like Black Fingernails, Red Wine. It's got the same polished sound, and I reckon it would have been. And there he is, Kav Temperley, on the screen in front of me. G'day, Kav. How are you?
Good. I'm very well. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Good to see you. It's been a long time. How are you?
Excellent.
You good? You been well?
Very well. I'm just here, as you can see, in my studio in Freo. I'm just halfway through working, spending the day writing and recording a song with this person who's on the couch over here.
Hello.
That's Annie. She can hide behind my shoulder over there. This is my studio. This is where I do most of my recording. So I've been working on my record for the last 2.5 years during the whole lockdown period, and most of it I've done in here because that's what happens when you're trapped in Perth and there's nowhere else to go.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, the isolation of COVID was one thing, but when you were in Perth, it would have felt a million times different.
Do you know, it's a funny thing. Like when we were first coming up in Eskis in the late 90s, you would get on a plane and you'd go to, and that would be amazing that you could make it out of Perth, because flights were so expensive. Yeah. And then you'd get on the road like 10 weeks at a time, and just kind of survive. And then you'd go home and kind of put yourself back together. And then somewhere, it's like Perth felt really isolated in those days. And it felt like if you didn't, take your project out to the rest of Australia, no Svengali was going to kind of cruise in and discover you. But then kind of somewhere in the mid, noughties or whatever, it felt like the world kind of opened up a bit and you could get on a plane. And, it was a big decision for us in Eskimo Joe to become Perth artists, because it meant that, we would have to do a lot of traveling. And it was always great writing and creating in Perth, but yeah, you'd have to travel and doing this whole 2.5 years of COVID. I just felt that kind of isolation and, the nature of the invisibility of living in Perth kind of come back in again. And there's really nice parts of it. Like it is easier to sit down and write a song if you think no one's waiting to hear it, but eventually you've got to take that song out to the world. So I've just started getting on planes again and going and doing gigs, and it feels pretty good to get out of the.
It'd be so weird for that, because I know a lot of people also recorded back-to-back albums because you had so much time. Some were just finishing off a project as COVID happened, and then didn't want to release it because he couldn't tour, and then in the middle of it all going, you know what, I might as well record another one. And so all of a sudden there's there's all these albums on shelves, you know.
I think like as well, you know, if you get an artist, you know, or a musician especially, and you chuck him in a room for 2 years, like they're going to start to dream and they're going to start to come up with ideas. Like most people who make music, I know, are like compulsive music makers. They will, if you put them in a room by themselves, they're just not going to be able to help themselves but write and record a whole lot of music. But I do think what you're going to see, like, so with myself in particular, like, so the album that I've written, which is called Machines of Love and Grace, is basically all written about, you know, the last 2.5 years of all of the kind of things that we've all gone through, you know, stuck in our rooms doing what we're doing. I've tried not to do like a kind of like a facts list of like, these are the things that happen. I've tried to kind of do it with an element of a sprinkling of poetry over the top of it. But but what I was going to say is that, you know, with all of these artists who are stuck in their rooms writing songs, I think it's only now that we're just kind of emerging out of this period that you're going to see some really great, you know, art and songs coming out. It's like 90% of the songs that I ever wrote in my life have been about love. And I've never really seemed to get bored of that. But I can never write about, you know, a love affair gone bad if I'm in the middle of it. I need to get on the other side of it, have some kind of amount of reflection, and then I can, you know, sit down and write a song about it. And I feel like that's the same with the whole COVID experience. We're all kind of getting this kind of slight PTSD, you know, slow kind of pressure coming off of the last couple of years. And yeah, everyone's kind of just finding time to reflect, I think.
Yeah, and I could imagine in Perth would have been a weird one because just like Australia, there was a natural isolation which protected us, but as Australia, the rest of the country got on with life a little bit, Perth hadn't quite had that COVID impact yet. And you were probably sitting there just going, when is it going to come, you know?
Well, it's happening right now, actually. It's
yeah.
but only just getting the COVID impact now, and everyone's getting COVID and all the rest of it. But really, it's relatively mild compared to what, you know, say people in Melbourne and stuff went through. So, you know, I count our isolation and lucky stars that we managed to kind of make it through okay.
Yeah. I mean, there was a story about the kids couldn't go out and play basketball, so they're taking the basketball rings down. And it's just like, what is going on here? But at least as a musician, you know, you can call on your friends as you did. So on the album, you're working with a few of the locals, like Katy Steele, I think I heard was one of them.
Yeah. So it wasn't really intentional, but the album's kind of ended up as a bunch of duets. And so there's me and Katy Steele do one song called Graduation Day, which will be one of the singles, I guess. And then there's another song with another artist from Perth called Siobhan Cotchins, who's like this really cool kind of alt country lady who's kicking some massive goals. So it's me and Siobhan doing a song together. And then there's me and John Butler as well doing a duet. So that's the first time we've ever done that. I've gotten up and sung with John a couple of times, and we accidentally sung one of our friends down the wedding aisle one time. We were at a wedding in the middle of the bush, of course, and and it was one of those things of like emergency, they're about to walk down the aisle, but we've got no one. The wedding singer's been stuck somewhere in traffic and can't find it. Is there any singers there? And then we're just like, I guess that's us, right? We're the singers. And so we kind of picked up the guitar and we were like, what song do you know? And when we worked out, you know, in the period of about 5 minutes that we both knew how to sing Stand By Me. So we sung my friend Lucy Peach and Richard down the aisle singing Stand By Me. And then we thought that was such a lovely moment that we decided we'd get up and do it at one of his shows. And the thing is, like, you know, in Eskimo Joe, we write pop songs. They're like 3.5 minutes long. If we have to play for longer than an hour, we're like, what are we going to play? You know, like that's so long. Whereas John Butler's shows go for 3 hours. And he was like, hey man, yeah, you should jump up and let's sing Stand By Me. And I was like, cool. When should I come up? I was like, maybe I should come up halfway through the show. And he's like, yeah, that's about an hour and a half into the show. And I was like, how about half an hour into the show, I'll come up and sing a song. So that ended up being halfway through song 2. So, yeah. That
Perth music mafia must be insane, you know, when you have your annual general meeting, you know. So you got John Butler, you got the guys from Jebediah, Eskimo Joe, Birds of Tokyo.
And it's Tame Impala, San Cisco, Who else have we got who's coming up? Oh, well, I mean, Pond are kind of up there as well now.
Yeah.
I mean, like Fremantle, most of these artists, maybe apart from Birds of Tokyo and Jebediah, but a lot of these artists live in Fremantle where I live. And it's a tiny little place. I don't know if you've ever been to Freo before.
I lived nearby. I was in Perth, and Freo was like a sort of second home as well. So, yeah.
So, Freo. And so, I mean, I feel very proud to come from Fremantle, and it's obviously got some kind of sense of creative juju about it because, you've got people like ourselves and San Cisco and John Butler and Tame Impala, but then you've also got like writers like, Tim Winton and, amazing like graphic artists. It's like, even in the building that I am right now, this is a place called Art Source where I work out of, and me and Annie, who I've just been recording with today, we did a little bit of explore around the building today, and it's just filled with, like, every room is filled with all of these different artists working. And above us, we just discovered they've made a sound lab, which is just a huge room filled with synthesizers and all of these old machines and stuff. So we're going to go have a play up there later on. But yeah, anyway, Freo is a great place to live to be an artist.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I always knew. I mean, for a period, when you guys first broke to the rest of the country, you were the biggest thing to come out of Freo. Then I soon discovered when I moved to Perth that it had such a healthy scene, and not just music, but as you said, artists in general. And nowhere else in the country do you really have it in such a small, little concentrated area. Yeah,
I mean, I think everyone's always been taken very seriously as an artist in Perth, but again, the tyranny of distance is pretty hardcore. I mean, again, not harping on too much about the kind of pandemic that we've been through, but it's just, I've really felt the isolation. Artistically, it's always fine. You can always sit down and write a song, but just, what we do is also we perform, and not being able to get up on stage and, tour around has been really felt like, we've been chopped off at the knees a little bit over this last little while. So I feel like that there's a direct relationship in writing a good song, getting out there and playing it in front of people, and then getting that reaction back, from the people, as you play it. Like, there's certain songs we play in Eskimo Joe that, I'm still not sick of playing From the Sea and, everybody singing along. It's just one of those things. So
yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, and luckily for those Eskimo Joe fans, the single, which is out now, it really just sounds like a straight up Eskimo Joe song. Like it's a brilliant track. I freaking love it.
Thank you. Yeah. When I sat down to write the song Machines of Love and Grace, I didn't know where it was going to land, because we had just done a couple of songs with Eskimo Joe. We'd managed to get 2 kind of singles out during the COVID period. And I sat down and started to write this song, and it kind of sounded like a classic Eskimo Joe song. And the way that we used to write a lot of the time in Eskimo Joe is I would write a song to the best of my abilities, and then I'd bring it in and be like, oh, hey guys, the song kind of goes like this. And then we'd workshop it until we had an Eskimo Joe song. And so with this song, like, I might have even played it to them in the very beginnings, like, hey, how about this? But yeah, I started writing that song maybe with the idea that it might be an Eskimo Joe song, or it might be someone else's song. But I think the problem is it was such a personal track for me. And the great thing about recording and writing a solo record is that it allows you to be a little bit more self-indulgent in that kind of, self-reflection space. And the song that emerged, which is Machines of Love and Grace, is this idea about what we went through in the last 2.5 years of the pandemic, about how much of an intimate relationship we have through our phones now.
Yeah.
And, like, through this period, like, you would be having dinner with people, on FaceTime, and they'd be on the other side of the world. Or I would watch, one of my kids with her boyfriend go to sleep with her boyfriend on FaceTime, and that was just like, that became normal. That's just how we do things. And it's our phones are the first things we look at in the morning and the last things we look at when we go to sleep at night. We have this really intimate relationship through this thing, and they're amazing. You can do all kinds of things with them, but for all of their good, there's also all of these kind of quite dark parts of it. Like, with the click of a button, you can be in like gambling, or you can be like watching pornography or stalking someone or whatever. It's open to all of it. And obviously they're a mirror, it's just going to reflect back what it is. But the song is really about that relationship. And I'm not trying to cast any judgment on, it's good or evil or whatever. I'm just kind of starting the conversation and just talking about, what we went through with it and what it now means to us, this thing.
Oh, the voyeurism side of it's totally true. I mean, Gen Z kids, they put themselves on, they share their location, on Snapchat and whatever, and that's something that you and I would probably never want to do. Like, you never want to share where you are at every single moment of your life, but they do it. That's what they do.
And and the idea of being an artist with it as well, like we're encouraged all the time to be posting and, to make TikToks and, doing and to, create content all the time. And for me, that I don't feel like that's very native to being like putting out art, because art for me is all about working away in your workshop to a point till you get this thing which is perfect, and then you're ready to present it to the world. It's like it goes against all of that, But in saying that, it's there and it exists, and it's like a deal with the devil. There's no going back now.
Yeah, that's true. The horses bolted, because they do encourage you, I know, to share every single bit of your creative steps when you're doing an album, and of course it's led by bands like Foo Fighters too. As soon as they go into the studio, they're sharing everything, and if Birds of Tokyo are very good at it too. I have to admit, as soon as they go in the studio doing demos, they're always sharing their progress. But traditionally, you want to go get locked away in a forest and do it out there.
Yeah, I don't. When Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were at some cabin out in Wales or whatever, creating Stairway to Heaven or whatever, I think it would have ruined the romance for me to see them, posting every day. I just want them to emerge like wizards from the fog, with this amazing masterpiece.
Yeah, exactly right. So the album, what's the progress? How many songs you got to go? Are you almost there?
Almost there. I've been telling everyone that the album's finished, but no, it's not actually finished yet. I've got about 7 songs complete, and really traditionally a record's about 12 tracks. So I'm getting there, pretty close. I've just, the coolest thing about starting to do some interviews about the record is, I start to talk to people really what the record's about, and it helps me kind of like having these conversations helps me boil down what I'm actually writing about. So just in the last 2 days, I've started to write the intro track to the album. I always love, big, like really important songs for me on the record is the opening track and the closing track. And just in the last 2 days, I've started to write that song. And the idea, the journey of the song journey of the album is going to start from this kind of emerging from lockdown period of this, coming out from our caves back out into the world again. And then all the songs will tell the stories of the different kind of demons and stuff that we faced, I guess, living by ourselves over these 2.5 years. And then I guess I don't know if I've written the closing track yet, but I guess it'll end back with some kind of question of where do we go next?
Is there something you have to do to get in the zone? Is it a glass of wine, or is it a jazz cigarette, or is it meditation?
Usually jazz cigarettes are very helpful. It probably takes your IQ down a little bit, but it, uninhibits you just enough to have some fun. No, look, the way that it generally works, I would have to say with, if we're going to talk about, drugs and popular culture and music, is alcohol is a great one if you're going to get on stage. If you're going to have a beer or two and get, it's great. You get in the zone. Smoking a number before you get on stage is the worst thing you could possibly do. I think we did it. We were like in Ballarat or somewhere in the late 90s or something like that, as we were just total noobs. And I think me and Joel were like, this would be a great idea. Let's get stoned and go on stage. We got on there. And even though there was like 3 people in the audience, it was the worst gig ever, because me and Joel got stoned, but Stu was completely straight and he was just looking at us going, what did you do? And we're just like, try to get through this gig. But I think, if you're going to, as you say, partake in a jazz cigarette and sit down and write a song, then it's great for writing, quite famously. But I think all those things are great to do after you've written most of the song. If you write the song, then you're getting it in. You're going to hit some writer's block pretty quickly. But if you kind of get the most of the guts of a song down, and then you smoke a number, and then you're like, oh, that's what I need to do, then I think it's a great thing to do.
I keep thinking if they finally legalize it over here, like California, it'd be great for creativity, but there'd be a lot of half-finished songs.
Funnily enough, I don't think legalizing it is going to stop people either smoking it or not smoking it, or however they enjoy. just gonna. I think that was a big thing in America because a lot of people who were doctors and lawyers, if they got arrested, it meant that they couldn't vote and they couldn't do all these things. And so I think destigmatizing it over there was a big deal because there was a lot of legal ramifications. In Australia, I don't think people care. They'll just, if they were doing it before, they'll keep doing it. If they weren't doing it before, they probably continue not doing it.
Exactly right. So during the last couple of years, what have you been listening to? We kind of all discover new things. You have hobbies or?
Geez, I mean, look, that's a big one. Obviously, I listen to tons of music, and really, my main hobby outside of music is music as well. So, which is kind of depressing. All I do is music. But no, I've been working on, as part of the album cycle. So I've been working with this really cool graphic artist called Joseph Dennis, and he's really interesting. He's he's an artist, but he just works in typography. I think that's what you call it. Where he just creates like fonts for things, but they're really kind of arty fonts. So he's been helping with the artwork, and then as part of that, we've created this whole about 7 or 8 NFTs, which has been a world that I've been going into. And I know that's kind of there's a bit of there's a stigma, or I don't know. A lot of people are kind of flashing around the idea of the NFTs. I'm not doing it to kind of get rich quick or do any of those things. I'm doing it as an extension of the art of the record. So he's helped me and Joseph come up with this artwork for the single, which will be part of the record. Then on top of that, I've got 7 versions of the same song, which will only exist in this run of NFTs. And they're coming out as a series that I'll probably continue on for the next couple of years. And this one's called Love in the Key of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then I'm going to do it. So there's going to be 7 NFTs for each one. And this particular one is I've got this very short love song. It's about a minute long. And I've got 7 versions of it. They're in all different genres. Some of them are kind of country. Some of them are all kind of indie folk or whatever. But then, so with each of those songs, obviously they're in the key of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Each of those songs will be attached to a piece of artwork, which is an extension of what's going on from the record. So my hobbies the last 2 years have been kind of going into that world a little bit. And my wife and me have this kind of company called the Temperley Collective, where we do production with young artists like Annie over here on the couch. And she's also just finished doing a blockchain course. So she's a full bottle on the whole Web3 world, which we're all entering into.
Well, I mean, you've always been ahead of the curve a little bit because, I mean, this is really cool. And there's things called Serenade now where you can, do songs for people and that's great. But in 2013, you did the crowdfunding for the album. I mean, that was really big back then.
Yeah, I'm always really interested in how we can expand kind of in a 3-dimensional way, the way that we not only fund music, but consume music. This whole old school idea that we just have these gatekeepers, and obviously the record companies were the gatekeepers for a long time. And that's not saying anything bad against record labels, because we were on record labels for a long time and it was really good until it wasn't. And then, we got into the world of crowdfunding, which was really an interesting thing to do, which is basically, you get your fans to kind of buy these packages, of different tiers, for people who don't know, you basically, you donate money and you get the album, it's basically buying the album in advance. And now we're kind of moving into this world, which feels like a nice way to sustain music, because we're all looking at because now the streaming services are the new gatekeepers, they're the ones who decide if you get paid or not. But the Web3 world and, the world of, blockchain and NFTs and all of those things is possibly a new way of funding artists. And it's really interesting because I don't want to go too much into what the blockchain is, but basically it's a decentralized way of storing information, as opposed to Google having all of their information on these one servers, and you've got to go onto the Google search engine to find their information. The Web3 it's on this thing called the blockchain is kept on everyone's computer, so it's completely transparent, which means that you and I could have a transaction, which is all there, written on the blockchain, easy to see, and I could sell you my record, and that transaction happens, and you pay in crypto or however you want to pay, and it's a brand new way of customers and people who create a utility or music or whatever doing that transaction. And I think anytime those things come up, like they did with crowdfunding or what's happening now with the Web3 world, we have to pay attention, and you got to try and put some skin in the game. You actually have to experiment and see if it works, because if it does work, fantastic. You've worked out a way to fund a good quality record, because that's really the crux of what we're talking about here. At the end of the day, artists need funds to make records. And if you're just relying on streaming services, or because we went to the whole crowdfunding platform because albums weren't really selling anymore, it's like, well, okay, we need that money to actually be able to make the records, to make quality albums, So, long story short, yes, we did the crowdfunding thing. It was good, but I think it could be improved on. With the Web3 thing, the way that it works is if I decide to put a record out, the record is has shares, or what they call in the Web3 world as tokens, and everybody buys a token from this record before it gets made, and then you use that money to make the record. Now, if that record does well, those tokens increase in value, and they pay you a dividend as well. So it's like a way that your fans can kind of get, they can get money back from investing in the project, but they also, it's in their best interest to promote that project, because then those coins become worth more money. And I think for this, the generation of kids who are all already, playing Roblox and those kinds of games, it's pretty native for those guys to be trading these coins, because that's how it works. And there's really cool platforms like Twitch that are kind of bridging the world between the Web3 and what we call Web 2. So that's exciting as well. But I think, it sounds nerdy and it doesn't sound very, entertaining. But for me, it's just about creating good art. So the bunch of NFTs that I've created, they're an extension of the art of the record. I'm not doing them. If people buy them and they make some money, fantastic. But I'm really just doing it because I just want to create cool shit that people like. Really, that's my interest.
Oh, it's fascinating, because I got friends in photography, and they're talking about the same thing, because photography is a tough one to police and to do copies, and if you get a great photo of Eskimo Joe on stage at the grand final, it's a very hard one to send a copy out to someone. You have to get it printed yourself and then send them the physical of it. But with this, you can.
And the blockchain, takes care of all of that stuff. Because every time you sell on that print, it's the digital stamp is in there, and someone will always get a percentage. Anyway, we digress.
Tell me about it. Let's go back to the podcast. Now, it's called The Rider, and we talked a little bit about drinking before a gig and after the gig, and smoking weed. Definitely don't do that. But what was on the Rider of Eskimo Joe back in the day compared to how the solo stuff is now when you play a gig?
The funny thing is we get really upset because we've been a band for over 20 years now. Yeah. So every once in a while, for some reason, the Rider from 2004 just keeps popping up at gigs recently, and everyone gets so pissed off. And and just let me paint a picture for you. This is of 2004. A carton of Corona, because that was the fancy beer that you get at the time. Vodka and Red Bull, of course. Because everyone was like, we would always drink vodka and Red Bull and then go on stage and be like, Jesus. And then I think whiskey was on that Rider as well. And, just a couple of those classic things. I think if you went back a couple of years before that, the fancy beer that we had at the time, I think we had James Bogues on the Rider for a little while. And I think James Bogues was probably the first one where we could actually ask for a beer, as opposed to just getting the six-pack or whatever you were given. And then there was a period of time, around 2006, when we were kicking some big goals and we could kind of ask for whatever we want. And I think Stu cheekily put a fun game on the Rider. So everywhere we would rock up, there would be some kind of fun board game that because some poor person who had to buy this Rider was like, oh, I better get them a game.
That's hilarious. I mean, it certainly shows the different stages. Because I think back and 2003 must have been Crown Lager or Han Premium. And imagine if you started in 98, you would have been asking for Illusion Shaker cocktails. I mean, it could have been amazing.
Yeah, it could have been amazing, but yes, thankfully there was no Illusion cocktails on the rider. Now our current rider is, we've all got kind of, slightly more sophisticated tastes. So now it's a nice bottle of gin with some Fever Tree tonic. We get some Hop Hog, which is quite a grunty beer from Western Australia. And then Peronis, which is just a good kind of session ale. So we'll get that. And then we get a bottle of Woodlands. Woodlands is the best wine, by the way. If anyone wants a good, like a quality $25 bottle of wine, we get a Woodlands Cab Franc Merlot and then a Woodlands Chardonnay as well. So that's where our rider's at the moment.
And the podcast is now sponsored by Woodlands. I will be expecting a box in the mail pretty soon. Did you ever go through a period like some bands do? And I always thought Eskimo Joe was pretty polished, and you probably didn't, but some bands go through the battle of the party and going out on the road on a long, grueling tour, and eventually having a conversation where it's like, okay, we've got to stop drinking pre-show.
I think everyone goes through that battle, but that battle happens more individually and less as a group. But we do have, on our, when session musicians come in the band now, we have a 2-drink maximum before they go on stage. And these things were, trial and error. We were going on stage one time, and a session musician who shall remain nameless, had got so drunk the night before and was vomiting in the toilet, and then had drunk a whole lot more alcohol to kind of level out the playing field, just to kind of feel normal again. And I was just like, dude, if you have to do this before you're going on stage, perhaps you shouldn't drink. And of course he got on and played amazingly, because the muscle memory of music. I've heard stories about people who've just been absolutely plastered and then got on and play, haven't missed a note. But for me, I had to stop drinking too heavily on the road in the pretty early days, just because my voice would just disappear if I drank too much. And it was actually we were doing the big day out in 2001, 2002, and it was our first time of playing, doing a national tour of it. So we were midday on one of the smaller stages, and anyway, I think we got to Melbourne or Sydney, and there was a 3-hour time difference between Perth and Melbourne and Sydney, and everyone was cracking beers, before they go on stage. And I was like, dudes, why are you having a beer? It's I looked at the watch, I'm like, it's 8:30 in the morning in Perth. Everyone's like, you got to have a beer before you go on stage. I was like, shit, man, if I have to have a beer before I go on stage, I think maybe I'm just going to not drink before I go on stage. So I watched Phil from Grinspoon, and he always looked plastered on stage, but sung wouldn't miss a note. And I watched him really closely, because they were always on the big day outs with us. And I realized he wasn't drunk. He was just pretending to be drunk. He would go on stage and he'd play the pissed wrecked dude, but then he was just doing it because that's what the people wanted. They wanted him to be that rock and roll dude, and it worked. And so I was like, okay, maybe there's something in this. And so I would go on stage and I'd just pretend to be drunk for about the first 3 songs, and then that's all you need the couple of drinks for, is those first 3 songs, and then you're away. So if it's a one-off gig every once in a while now, I'll have a drink or 2, because it's fun and you're with the fellas and all the rest of it. But really, I don't need to have a drink before I go on stage. In fact, when I'm at home, and that's probably been one of the worst things about the pandemic, I've just been like, don't have a gig this week, blah, 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 blah. So I've definitely drunk and smoked a lot more in the last 2.5 years than I would normally. Yeah,
I had to go to 2-week COVID isolation, and you would not believe how much I drank. That cheap Aldi red wine. I mean, God, it goes a long way.
And we were buying cartons of wine, because we're in 2-week lockdown. And so we bought enough booze to last on an island for 3 years. And of course you just drink it if it's there. So
now, but before we wrap up, I know you as all musicians are, you are quite political, and you must be positive about new government for the music industry, especially. There's a lot of recovery to go for not just for bands, but for venues as well.
Everyone promises a lot, and let's hope that they all come through with their promises. But the very fact that we haven't had a minister of the arts for the last couple of years, we've only had a minister for roads and infrastructure. I mean, that says a whole lot for the government that was in, and how much they cared about the arts. But the guy who will be the minister for the arts is a chap called Tony Burke. And he, for all I can see, and I've met him a couple of times, he seems to really like music and really care about it. If you go to visit him at his office, he'll pull out a guitar. He'll want to have a jam. Okay, Dad, let's do it. But he seems to have some pretty good ideas. And I know that when they were talking about running for government last time, he had all this money to put towards arts hubs. So finding places where they could, set up spaces that would be for, people to go and jam and record and do those things. It's an okay idea, but really after the last couple of years, really they need to look at the states, find out what the main music funding body, like for instance, we've got Wham in Western Australia. They do great things for the arts, but they've got no money. Give them a bunch of money so they can give out grants to bands and people making records, going on tours, just for people who are actually working, like having an arts hub or whatever. Cool, great, go and jam with your mates. That's really not what it's about. Like the arts industry and the music industry in Australia is an import-export business. We have top grade songwriters writing number one hits in America who are Australian. We have bands who need to tour overseas and need to tour in Australia. They need money to do these things. Back to what we were talking about, making records, the arts has always traditionally been funded. Give some money to people to make records, but make sure they've got, they fill out, they cross all the right boxes and tick their T's and cross their I's or whatever. Make sure they do it properly. Make sure it's a good effort. But yeah, I think I would love to see some proper money go back into the arts. Also, sorry, I swear I won't get on too much of a soapbox here.
It's all right.
Stuff like the ABC, like reinstate funding to the ABC so they can have music shows. Like they were the only TV station anywhere on free to air or anything who are actually doing live Australian music. And if you want to boil it down to the idea that this is about telling Australian stories, this stuff is vital, especially after what we've just been to. It's going to fall on the artists to be, that burden is going for them to have to tell the stories of what we went through. Again, no one wants to read a fact sheet about what we went through over the last 2.5 years. But if you hear a rockin' song and you want to sing along to it, I think that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah,
and
well,
hopefully the government.
I hope so, and I mean, certainly priorities have changed in the last 2 years as well. Like the risk you have now being a touring band, and how if one of you goes down with COVID, it's pretty tough to you got to reschedule. The insurance bills must be going through the roof, and I think New South Wales got a really good scheme, which they had sort of last year and in the last couple of summers, is they had almost 1,000 small gigs around the state subsidised by the government. And if they did it on a national level, that actually could be something really cool.
I agree. And I think that's the approach they have to have. I mean, bands generally make money from doing live shows, so that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, well, look, Kav, it's great to catch up, and can't wait to hear the finished product of the album. The song is amazing, though. It is exactly how I imagined it was going to sound. It's just polished and it's beautiful, and you can play it over and over again, and I haven't got sick of it yet. So,
well, free just to put it on repeat on Spotify and then just turn your phone off. Just leave it playing all night, and that'll rack up some streams because, that's what we need.
Deal. Kav, thanks for catching up.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
What a cool bloke. Kav Temperley from Eskimo Joe. Can't wait to hear more of this new album, which should be coming out by the end of the year, we hope. Machines of Love and Grace. And of course, if you go to Freo and go to the pub, Mojo's, you might just bump into him. The Rider is on Instagram. Just search for The Rider Pod. And next week on the podcast, one of the bands that really paved the way for Good Charlotte, Sum 41, and yeah, even Simple Plan from the late 90s. They're back with a brand new album. We're going to find out what they've been up to as well for the last 20 or so years. That's next week on The Rider. We'll catch you then. This is The Rider with Becko.